My name is Leah, and I am the Director of Worship and Spiritual Formation here at the local church. As we begin this time of worship together, I just invite you to be still and anchored, present where you are, as I read this grounding moment for us. This is For Citizenship by John O'Donohue. In these times when anger is turned into anxiety, and someone has stolen the horizons and the mountains, our small emperors on parade never expect our indifference to disturb their nakedness. They keep their heads down, and their eyes gleam with reflection from aluminum economic ground. The media wraps everything in a cellophane of sound, and the ghost surface of the virtual overlays the breathing earth. The industry of distraction makes us forget that we live in a universe. We have become converts to the religion of stress and its deity of progress, that we might have the courage to turn aside from it all and come to kneel down before the poor, to discover what we must do, how to turn anxiety back into anger, how to find our way home.
I wonder if you've had this experience. I wonder if this has happened to you. Maybe you're doing some spring cleaning, or perhaps you're getting ready for a move, and so you start to open drawers that haven't been opened in a long time, or find yourself in closets full of clothes that have long gone out of style. But then you find something. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a yearbook, or an old T-shirt, or a photo album, and before you know it, hours have passed. Nothing is packed. Nothing is cleaned because you got sucked into whatever it was you found. Reading the messages from past crushes in your yearbook, or reliving the glory days from all the times you wore that shirt. Letting your mind wander about the people in the photos you hold, wondering, where are they now? Has that ever happened to you? Happens to me all the time. Most recently, it was a few weeks ago. I was at my parents' house, and I had gone up to get something out of my childhood bedroom. And next thing I know, I end up getting lost in a box of memorabilia from high school. Things like regalia from all of the honor societies that I was in, notes that were passed during class, pictures from band trips, even my old marching band shoes. And now, granted, I haven't thought about these things in years, but I still can't get rid of them because they hold so much sentimental value for me. To which my mom would respond, well, then why are they at my house and not yours? And it's a fair question, sure. But that's beside the point, because the point is that this is all to set up our brand new sermon series for the month of July. Because here's the thing. I think the same thing is true for certain stories in the Bible, stories that perhaps live somewhere in our understanding of who God is and who we are and what it means to follow Jesus, but then maybe we haven't seen in a while. Maybe there's stories we heard as kids that have found themselves in junk drawers or stuffy closets collecting dust. And maybe it's because we don't know that we even have use for them anymore, but we can't get rid of them. And so this series is about revisiting some of those classics, dusting off some of those ancient stories, and pondering together with fresh eyes and rewilded spirits what wisdom they might have for us today. It's a series that we're calling, you ready for this? Awesome God. Awesome God. Fresh spins on ancient stories with vintage vibes. It's good, right? You got the song in your head yet? Our God is an awesome God. This series was born from the idea that when you think about summer in church, you often think about Vacation Bible School, VBS. You know VBS, that often week-long extravaganza where weary, exhausted parents outsource their childcare to churches so that they can go to work or do their Target runs in peace while the kids hear Bible stories and do crafts and eat copious amounts of goldfish crackers. And without a physical space to call our own quite yet, we're not at the place where we at the local church can host a vacation Bible school. But if we did, it would be epic. But we got to thinking about some of those familiar stories from VBS, those stories from the Bible that maybe you heard as a kid, but maybe didn't make too many other appearances throughout your life. And often, because they're tailored for kids, the messages of these stories can be watered down or overly simplistic or rooted in some sort of moralism. And that's where the awe in awesome comes in, the AWE. One of my favorite new authors and thinkers is a guy named Michael Bungay Stanier. He introduced me to what he calls the most important and best question you can ask. He calls it the awe question, AWE, the awe question. And it stands for, and what else? And what else? The awe question. He writes that this question, when you ask it, engenders curiosity. It uncovers new possibilities. It helps you move past the surface and go deeper. That's the awe question. And what else? And so, what would it look like for us to ask that awe question of these ancient stories? And what else? To go beyond the sanitized and simplistic, to rediscover an awesome God. That's our task for this month. And we're beginning today with the story of Daniel in the lion's den. I'm going to read the story for us here in just a moment. But first, I want to be sure to welcome you and introduce myself. My name is Brent, and I serve as the pastor here at the local church. And we say this every week. We hope for three things each and every time you interact with us in any way, whether it's on Sunday morning in person, here online as you are right now, whether it's an Instagram post or a local table, whatever it might be. We want you to feel affirmed, anchored, and empowered. That is affirmed in your belovedness as the child of God that you are, anchored in the good news that we share together each week, and empowered then to take that good news toward your next faithful step on the way of Jesus. Affirmed, anchored, and empowered all by God's grace. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey or on no journey at all, you have a place here at the local church. We are more whole with you. Whether church is your thing, used to be your thing, or has never been your thing, you belong here. We're more whole with you, and we thank God for your presence. If you hear nothing else this morning, or whenever you happen to be tuning in, we hope that you hear that. You belong, you are beloved, and we're more whole with you. As we begin, let's just be quiet for a moment. Holy God, I give you thanks for this time this morning. Wherever my friend is participating from, I pray that you would be with them, that they would know your presence, and that they might be transformed in some small way by this time together here. Open our eyes, our ears, our hearts to discover or rediscover the ways that you are indeed awesome, oh God. Help us to ask good questions, to explore the edges, to lean into the mystery. Not be afraid of what we find, for you are with us. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. All right, so I want to set a little background first on this story, Daniel in the lion's den. The book of Daniel is found in the Old Testament, the story of God and God's people before Jesus. And the story takes place during the time of the Babylonian exile, the 6th century BCE. At this point in time, Jerusalem has been sieged by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. The temple, the center of religious life and identity, has been destroyed, and many, many Jews were taken captive to Babylon to live a life in exile. Their world had been upended. Their past was shattered, their future uncertain, everything they held dear, everything that grounded them, their customs, their traditions, their community, gone. And Daniel is one such Jew who was taken into exile. The story goes that he was a young man at the time, wise, he was part of the nobility, and King Nebuchadnezzar stationed Daniel in his court where he served as an official for the king. And throughout Daniel's time in service, as we hear through the book's first 5 chapters, God gives Daniel this gift gift of dream interpretation. And he's able to interpret dreams better than anybody else. And as a result, he becomes a key advisor. He prophesies downfalls. He survives the Persian Empire's conquering of the Babylonians, continues gaining influence, all while maintaining a steadfast, unwavering faith. It's a remarkable story. The first 5 chapters of Daniel are filled with stories of dreams and statues and fiery furnaces and kings turning into animals and mysterious writing on the wall. It's a heck of a ride, y'all. And our story picks up today when Daniel is approaching his 90s. He's getting up there, but he maintains his wisdom, his stature, his influence. The kingdom, as I referenced, is now under the rule of Darius, the Persian king. And according to the story, Daniel has distinguished himself above the other administrators and satraps, like governors, in the king's court. And what you need to know is that Daniel is the real deal. He's clean. There's no corruption, no funny business. He's super faithful. He's the kind of person who remembers birthdays and sends thank you cards and always has the best white elephant gift and pays for dinner. And because he's this good, the other officials are jealous. And so because they don't have anything on him and won't find any dirt, they know that his one weakness is the strength of his faith. And that's where we pick up the story. Here is chapter 6, verses 6 through 27. And as I read, I want you to listen for what words and phrases shimmer for you. Throw them into the comments as I read if you want, so that others might know what's sticking out, what's resonating with you. All right, here it is. Daniel 6, 6 through 27. So the administrators and satraps conspired and came to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever. All the administrators of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an interdict that whoever prays to any god or human for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the interdict and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Therefore, King Darius signed the document and interdict. Although Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he continued to go to his house, which had windows in its upper room open toward Jerusalem, and to get down on his knees 3 times a day to pray to his God and praise him, just as he had done previously. Then those men watched and found Daniel praying and seeking mercy before his God. Then they approached the king and said concerning the interdict, "O king, did you not sign an interdict that anyone who prays to any god or human within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into a den of lions?" The king answered, "The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they responded to the king, "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the interdict you have signed, but he is saying his prayers 3 times a day." When the king heard this charge, he was very much distressed. He was determined to save Daniel, and until the sun went down, he made every effort to rescue him. Then the conspirators came to the king and said to him, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and the Persians that no interdict or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." Then the king gave the command, and Daniel was brought and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you faithfully serve, deliver you." A stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet ring of his lords, so that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No entertainment was brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at dawn the king got up and at first light hurried to the den of lions. When he came near the den where Daniel was, he cried out anxiously to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you faithfully serve, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Daniel then said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me, because I was found blameless before him. Also before you, O king, I have done no wrong." Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. And so Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. The king gave a command, and those who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and thrown into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. Before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all peoples and nations of every language throughout the whole world, may you have abundant prosperity. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people shall tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. This is the word of God for all of God's creation. Thanks be to God. Let's recap, because it was a lot. These jealous officials hash this plan and say to the king, "Oh, King Darius, you're so great." They're laying it on thick. They're playing up his ego. And so they say, you should create a law where if anybody prays to any god or human other than you for the next 30 days, they must be thrown in a den of lions. They got to go. And King Darius thinks it's a great idea. So he does. Sure. He enacts a law that does exactly this. But Daniel, even though he's aware of this new law, goes and prays to his God Yahweh anyway. The other officials witness Daniel doing just this, and they go straight back to the king and say, Darius, didn't you sign a law that anyone who prays to another god or human within 30 days is going to be thrown into the den of lions? Well, we thought so. We've got some news for you. And Darius is actually sad about this. Darius, his name means goodness, believe it or not. And there are some subtle references here in the story that we're supposed to pick up. He's not a bad guy. Darius seems to actually like Daniel. And so he tries to think of possible ways to spare Daniel, but he can't. And even the officials are like, man, that's too bad. But you can't take it back. You might be thinking, he's the king. He can do anything he wants. But to do so would hurt his pride or make him look weak or undermine the king's rule. So it's a no-go. It's a non-starter. The king's hands are tied. Daniel is placed in the den of lions overnight, which if you know anything about lions, then you know that's when they do most of their hunting. Not a good time. But then morning comes and the king goes to assess the damage to see what's left of Daniel. I imagine him sort of getting there with his finger, peering between his fingers. And but to Darius's amazement, there stands Daniel, describing how an angel has shut the lion's mouth, leaving Daniel unscathed. And as you heard, that's when the king throws the other nefarious officials into the den instead, along with their wives and their children. And the king worships the God of Daniel, the God that we worship too. It's a wild story, isn't it? When was the last time you spent some time with it? It's been a while for me. Now, look, often when we hear the story, or maybe this is how it was taught to you, the focus is on what Daniel does. Understandably, it's Daniel in the lion's den, right? And the message is to be more like Daniel, be courageous like Daniel, be strong like Daniel, have faith like Daniel. And the subtle message then is that if you too do all the right things, if you too get on your knees and pray 3 times a day like Daniel, then God will spare your life. Whether those words have been said to us or not, this is often how we approach not just this story, but a life of faith in this sort of transactional, conditional, if-then, cause-effect manner. We might feel it in those moments of frustration when those internal voices start to chirp and say, well, I guess you didn't pray hard enough. Or when we start to bargain with God. Have you ever had those moments? God, if you just do this thing for me, if you just give me this job, then I promise I'll go to church every Sunday. There's sometimes when we're hit with something unexpected, like a diagnosis or a relationship on the brink, or our kids are going through something tough, we start to tick back through the last few weeks or months of our lives to try to find out what we did that might have brought this on ourselves. Do you do that too? Because here's the thing, even when we know better, and even when we know that's not true, the idea that it's up to us, that it's somehow our fault, or that it depends on what we do or don't do, that idea is way down in there. Like a squatter, it's made a home in our hearts. And it makes sense. It's the water that we swim in each day, after all. And so this is when we ask that awe question. And what else? This past week, we launched our book study for parents and parent-adjacent caregivers and anyone with an interest in nurturing kids' faith, really. And we're reading this great book called Woven, Nurturing a Faith Your Kid Doesn't Have to Heal From by Meredith Miller. It's not too late to join if you'd like to. We're meeting again on July 17th, by the way. Shameless plug. We'll get you a copy if you want. Leave a comment. I'll follow up. But one of her main arguments in the book spoiler alert, is that when we approach Scripture, we often jump too quickly to what is this about? What's in it for me? What am I supposed to take away from this? But Miller says that this isn't the primary objective of Scripture. The biggest problem, she says, with mining Bible stories for so-called biblical principles is that this simply isn't what the Bible is about. The point of the Bible is not to provide principles, but to tell the story of what God is doing in the world. Real, regular humans are important characters in the story, but God is the central character throughout. Isn't that good? All this to say, we often fall into this trap with the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Remember, be more like Daniel, be courageous like Daniel, be strong like Daniel, have faith like Daniel. And sure, that's not a bad thing. We'll come back around to it, but that's not the first thing. It's not the primary thing. So perhaps our and what else this week is to shift the focus to God's presence and activity in the story, what God is doing in the world. We need to hear that too, not just kids. Because here's Daniel, who, remember, is blameless, who has done everything right, honorable, sends thank you cards, and he's unjustly thrown into a den of lions. Here's Daniel, overcome by empire, the victim of unjust law. Here's Daniel, standing face to face with what has to feel like the end of the world. I've spent enough time as pastor with you these past few years, weeks, days, to know all of the ways that you might feel this too. All of the ways the future seems fragile. The deck seems stacked. The hope absurd. And the narratives and the noise that fill our airwaves and feeds and screens don't help. There's no money to be made from hope, after all. You don't have to look far for despair, panic, hand-wringing, and shallow hot takes that exacerbate our deepest fears. So here's Daniel. And what else? Here's God. Here's the God who meets Daniel and is present with Daniel in this place of uncertainty and fear and injustice. Here's a God who protects Daniel when the sinister threat from empire is terrifyingly close. Here's a God who acts decisively in ways we couldn't have imagined and makes a way when there seems to be no way, by sending an angel to shut the mouths of the lions and delivering Daniel into a future filled with hope when everyone was certain this was it. This was the end. Again and again and again, this is the God we encounter in Scripture. When the odds are stacked and the night seems to be closing in, God says, I got you. We see it in the deliverance of the Israelites from Egyptian oppression in Egypt, and the saving of the Jewish people from genocide at the hands of Haman and Esther, delivering Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the fiery furnace just a few chapters earlier in Daniel, and showing up in flesh and bone and breath and blood in the person of Jesus, who fed and healed and loved and restored, and who discloses the deepest truth of our being, who reveals to us what it means to love fully and live abundantly. Here is God. I want to be clear that I'm not saying there isn't plenty to be afraid of. There is. Whether it's the existential, intangible threats of a warming climate, or a future with less freedom than you enjoy now, whether it's the pervasive threat of gun violence, or a doctor's appointment that's looming, or a phone call that could change everything, or a future without a loved one. I'm not trying to downplay or diminish any of it. It's real. But here in the story, we discover a God who is with us in it all, who doesn't abandon us to despair, who delivers us too into a future of hope. Here is God. And what else? Here also is Daniel, who doesn't have courage so that God will save him, but who is instead empowered to come face to face with these threats, emboldened to resist evil, injustice, and oppression precisely because he knows this hope, because he's grounded in it. He knows this God. I know I've told this story, but it bears repeating. It's one of my favorites. There's the story of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the late, great Archbishop Desmond Tutu, from a time when he was surrounded by a throng of people in the throes of South Africa, throes of apartheid in South Africa. People who are afraid, who have experienced incredible atrocities, who are mourning the loss of friends and neighbors and family and loved ones, and they're all surrounding Desmond Tutu, looking to him for some semblance of hope. And the story goes that with every tear-stained eye on him, Archbishop Tutu, also grounded in this hope, would raise his Bible in the air and thunder, "My friends, do not despair. Do not lose hope. I've read the end of the book. We win." It's my favorite. Really is. And so perhaps as we dust off this story today of Daniel and the lion's den, what I hope is that this is a fresh spin on an ancient story. And I hope that you might remember that we're not the first to know the threat of empire, not the first to stare down our fears, not the first to shrug off the absurdity of hope. And what else? That the God who delivered Daniel, who comes to us in Jesus, is the same God who meets us here to deliver us into a future that we couldn't possibly see coming. And what else? When we know this hope and ground ourselves in it, our resistance, our action, and our movement can be that much more impactful, transformative, compassionate, and holy for the sake of God's world. Our God is an awesome God indeed. Amen.